Good morning, everybody, and please take your seats. We are starting momentarily. So, very welcome to the 13th Sweden-U.S. Entrepreneurial Forum, and very welcome those of you that are joining us online watching our live stream. My name is Magnus Aronsson. I have the pleasure to be the managing director of Esprit, one of the co-organizers of this forum. And I'm really happy that we're organizing today together with the commercial service at the US Department of Commerce and together with the US Embassy here in Stockholm. I would also like to start to acknowledge because without their help and their support, wouldn't be able to do this. Our main partner is Vinnova, the Swedish innovation agency. We have the media partner, Entrepreneur Magazine, and we're collaborating with our network partners, American Club of Sweden, AmCham Sweden, and Swedish American Chamber of Commerce, USA. Without their support and their help in this, we wouldn't be here today. So the idea with this forum is to really have a space and a physical meeting place where people that are really engaged and interested in the collaboration between Sweden and US, particularly when it comes to entrepreneurship and innovation, how to make more business with SMEs and entrepreneurs. And over the years, we always try to have a multi-stakeholder approach to this, which means we want to have policymakers here, we want to have investors, we want to have entrepreneurs, we want to have students, we want to have people from academia, because we believe that's where, in this sort of melting pot of people coming from different perspectives, that sort of diversity, and when you have the convergence of new fields and ideas, that's when things really do happen. And and I also would like to say thank you now, because probably at the end of the day, I will be totally exhausted and then I will probably forget about it. Thank you all the speakers that have come in for this day. If you have gone through the program, you see we have a stellar group of speakers from the US, from Sweden, that are really good at what they're doing. And one of the features that I'm really pleased about the forum is that the delegation of speakers we're bringing in from the US, they are here the whole day. So you will because you all go to different conference seminars, and so very often people just shoot in, do their whatever they do, and then they leave to do something else. But the core group of speakers we bring in for US, about 3 to 5 people every year, they're here the whole day is to give you the opportunity to meet with them, to network with them, to talk with them. And they're very friendly, even if they don't not always look that way, but they're very friendly. Not this group this year, but we had some instances previous year in that case. But they're really friendly, they're really open, and they're really willing to help, which I think is a very good feature. So, to begin off, I'm really, really happy and glad that we have the new US ambassador. Well, she's been in town for 6 months, so now she knows the playing ground here. And to welcome up on stage the US ambassador to Sweden, Azida Arashi. Please join me on stage.
Good morning. Thank you, Magnus, and thank you all for being here. Thank you, Magnus, for your great leadership with this conference and in the partnership that we've had with you with the US Embassy over the years. So I'm very excited to be here because I think entrepreneurship is at the heart of a lot of things. And as you may know, I had a business background, and so this is something, entrepreneurship and leadership are things that I very much care about, and I was involved in different ways in development of leaders and so forth. I can give you, there are 2 speeches I can give you, and I'm going to tell you the one that I'm not going to talk about, which is to tell you about how important it is that the US and Sweden have a wonderful business partnership, which we do, and how Swedish investment in the US keeps growing, and it's $48 billion, and Sweden is the 11th largest FDI investor in the US, and how there are areas that are ripe for partnership between US and Sweden, like IT and clean tech and life sciences. That's not a speech I'm going to do, but I just did sort of summary of it. But instead, what I would like to do is actually talk about, excuse me, you and being an entrepreneur. I have this great story. So my brother is a Silicon Valley entrepreneur. He's actually one of a third of entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley are of a migrant background, and he's one of them. He's an inventor. He's a serial entrepreneur. He has VCs, thank you, on his board, and so we always talk about these things in a sort of a meta level in terms of ideas. And I have this great story about what is a business person and what is an entrepreneur. And some of you may have heard it. But so there are two guys, one guy and one gal, because we're in Sweden. And they each own 3 cows and they have 10 customers. And the first person, the guy, he has a routine. He gets up at 4 in the morning, milks the cows and delivers the milk around 8, and he makes money. And he buys more cows, and so he grows his business. And that's a businessman. The second one, she has 3 cows and 10 customers, but she also realizes that there are parallel industries with milk. So there are cookies, there are newspapers in the morning. So what she does is she sells one of her cows and buys a cookie making machine. And she also talks to her friends and see who wants to distribute newspapers and takes that dealership. And so now she has fewer customers because she has less milk to sell because she sold a cow. But she starts delivering cookies, complimentary cookies with her milk, and she can also provide newspapers with that. And soon enough, the 7 customers that she has now, because she has fewer customers, start buying cookies from her, and they tell their friends about how happy they are, and they get newspapers and so forth. And her business grows, and you sort of can figure the rest of the story. She's an entrepreneur. If you look up the definition of entrepreneur, essentially in the dictionary, it's the same as a businessman, somebody who wants to take a risk and start a business and so forth. But in my mind, and I think it's a good way to make a distinction in terms of one's behavior and way of thinking, an entrepreneur has an innovative business strategy, like the second person did in our story, and is able to really think in terms of the context of where she's doing business. So then the question for me is then, what is the difference between being an entrepreneur and being entrepreneurial? Because I really think that you can be entrepreneurial, and you should be, particularly if you're an entrepreneur, but you can be entrepreneurial in anything that you do. And if I said, raise your hand and say, what does it mean? I'm sure you would all have different ideas, and we could do that, but for the interest of time, we won't. But I would love to hear what you think. But I think it's somebody that is willing to take risks, has an idea, has energy, has hope, wants to make things happen. There's a certain independence and willingness to take risks and ease of being able to stay uncomfortable, so forth. And that is a quality that I think that one can develop, and I would say that if you are an entrepreneur, that's really essential, and being innovative is a big part of that. So from being entrepreneurial to innovation, then what makes someone innovative? And I really think that I would say diversity, but I don't want you to right away go to, diversity of colors of skin or migrants or whatever. There are 2 kinds of diversity, I think. There's one, the diversity that you can have in a society. So Sweden has taken a lot of migrants. Let's stay with Sweden. You have this potential labor force that, by the way, at the embassy, we're very much working with different stakeholders in Sweden to see how we can, what we call, put talent to work. So there's a lot of talent. Not all the people that are here as migrants have skills, but many of them have talent. So how do we take the talent and help them develop skills so that Sweden can actually benefit from this potential human capital rather than having it be a burden or seen as a burden. So there's an actual practice of developing that, and there's also a shift in the frame of mind. And I think in the U.S., we view that sort of diversity as very much a part of our strength. So there's that societal diversity. But I think in terms of being an entrepreneur, it's very important to have a diverse mind yourself. So there's the internal diversity. And I would say that from my own personal experience, having lived in different countries, every time I thought I had something figured out in terms of, this is a quote reality, this is how really things are, that paradigm was sort of pulled out from under me. So I've lived, as some of you may know, in Iran, in Europe, in Japan, and now here. And they're not just different countries, but there were countries that had fundamentally different social structures, religious and philosophical and political underpinnings, from an Islamic country to a Judeo-Christian culture in Europe to Confucianism, Buddhism in Japan. And I found it at first very uncomfortable because, well, what is the right way or what is the way? What is real? And I finally decided, well, there are many different ways of looking at it. And that's what I call my internal diversity, because in some ways I think I'm sort of a microcosm of what the United States is, but in one person, and that's what we have in the U.S. We have people that have different life stories that look at things differently, and it is from the clash of those different perceptions that innovation and creativity and innovative solutions rise. So it's sort of a, linking things, and I think that the last part with diversity is that diversity of opinion, diversity of representation is really what I'm talking about. So I've gotten in trouble with some feminists who've said, I said, well, we don't want to just have women just to have women, but we need to have women at the table because they represent a different point of view, and that will make us smarter, and both women and men should care about that, certainly. So it's not just to have a certain gender that you can check off, but yes, women, yes, minorities, yes, LGBT, yes, anyone who has a different point of view and a different way of looking at things. And that's what I mean by real diversity. And for that to happen, you need equality. I gave a speech in Washington some time ago about equality, creativity, and so forth. And I think one of the reasons that Sweden and the United States are both very strong in innovation is that there is equality in the sense of at least trying to provide equal opportunity and access to certain opportunities. In Sweden, as you all know, it's very impressive that you have one of the highest rates of startups and innovation in your country. And I firmly believe it's because people have access to education and all voices are valued and appreciated. And that's what we try to do in the States. So I want to link those things to say that diversity is really supported by equality and social policies that support equality. And it's that diversity both externally in a society, but internally as you build your own experiences in life and you become friends with people you disagree with, that will lead to creativity and innovative solutions and ultimately entrepreneurship. So that's kind of my way of linking everything together. And from that, I know that you're all interested in making connections in Silicon Valley and talking to VCs, so I was asked to say a word about that. And as I mentioned, my brother, I've talked to him a lot about VCs, and when I was in New York, I was on an angel investor group, in an angel investor group of 7 women. We jokingly called ourselves G7. And we had different backgrounds and had done well enough in different things. And we wanted to invest and empower women who had startup ideas and, be their angel investors. And I would say that we and other angel investors that I know, and also VCs that I know, they look for one thing. That's the most important thing. And it's to look at you in the eye and see that you really believe in your idea. And they can sniff it out if you 98% believe, but 2% have doubts. And so I don't have a technique to say how should you present your ideas, whether you should have an executive summary, this should be your presentation. I really want to emphasize the most important thing is where you're coming from inside and how you see yourself as a leader, as an entrepreneur. And if you're not 100% sold on your idea and believe in your idea, then you have work to do to go back and think about why. And because if you don't believe in your idea, then, why should somebody else invest money in you if you're not so sure? So what we used to look at, and I would say we could see with some sort of proof, anecdotal proof, that the businesses that we invested in when I was an angel investor, that succeeded were ultimately the ones where we saw that fire, where we saw that belief and excitement in the eyes of the person who was presenting it to us. And we saw the can-do spirit. We saw that person could execute, really had a vision, but also, of course, had a strategy and a way to execute. We were not so sure, we were not so concerned about their background and their resume and what they had done before. We were interested in now and the person sitting in front of us now. And it's a little bit similar to what I say to my daughter in college. I say to her, don't take classes, take teachers. So look at the professor, take the ones that are excited about what they teach, that make what they teach very exciting. That's how you will find a subject that you may not even have cared about before, but suddenly you find really interesting because of the professor. I mean, you all have had this experience when you took a course that you really loved. You loved the subject, but you were so bored and maybe even turned off from the topic, and vice versa. So it's the same thing with investing. You know, we invested in, and I think VCs, I can say this with some, I've never been a VC, but I know a lot of them. And I was an angel investor, as I said. So I think what they really look for the most is that energy. And I think just as you can all have that intuition about people and sense insincerity or lack of excitement, or if somebody's talking but they're not really excited, that's not going to fly if that excitement isn't there. And for the Swedes in the audience, I would say that if you're going to Silicon Valley, you really have to work on getting rid of this jantelagen. All right. It's a very appealing quality. I see it all the time. And I think it's why Sweden has been so successful in so many things that you've done in trade, renewable energy, pop music export, development assistance, all the things that we work on with you at the embassy. Because you're always saying, well, what can we do better? It's not good enough. It's not good enough. And that's why you're so good. But I also say that in America, and that's sort of, if you're going in a different culture, you don't need to brag. I understand that. That's not attractive anywhere. But you can certainly assert with some middle-of-the-road confidence that these are the things that you're good at and these are the things that you're trying to do. And don't be too modest about it, because that will get lost. And I think that it will not do justice to the great ideas that you have. So I sort of went on. That was what I wanted to, we talked about, and I hope that was helpful, and I'd love to have a conversation with you and answer any questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Before we open up for a couple of questions from the audience, I would like to ask one thing. Sort of, over your 6 months now here in Sweden, I know you visited Sweden before becoming ambassador, but during this sort of more extended time, what has surprised you most about Sweden? What was the thing that you didn't know about Sweden that you just suddenly felt, oh, wow?
Well, I have a serious answer and kind of a funny answer. The serious one actually has to do with what I just said, is that even though I had read quite a bit and learned about Sweden, and Sweden, and it's so much more about IKEA and ABBA. Everybody knows that, but it's so much more about innovation and the progressive society that you are. But even I, after having done a lot of work on learning about Sweden, having been here, was really surprised about how good you are at so many things, globally. And that's really impressive. 50% of trade based on GDP, and so you're a great partner for TTIP for us. 2/3, 68% of your energy is from renewables. I mean, you're way ahead of the EU 2020 goals already. And that's really impressive. And so that you're a leader in that in Europe in wanting to be energy secure. Development assistance around the world, we do a lot of work promoting democracy, gender equality, rule of law, LGBTQ rights, transparency, internet freedom. We do that through CETA and USAID and public-private partnerships. You are one of our top 3 bilateral partners around the world, and it's a country of just 10 million people. Pop music, again, #1 exporter per capita, startups. I mean, I could go on and on. It's not just one, but so many areas in which you're good at. And you have to ask yourself, how did that happen? And I think part of it is that equality that you have in your society. that leads to innovation. The funny one is that I was surprised about is how much Swedes love to give speeches at parties. So I was at a wedding, 50th anniversary wedding, and the speeches went on for 3 hours. But then somebody told a joke, so I'll tell you because it's funny. There are 3 people on a death row, and there's a French, an American, and a Swede. And they said, "Well, what is your last wish?" And the French says, "Oh, I want this great dinner with foie gras and champagne," and goes on and explains the dinner before I die. And the Swede says, "I would like to give a speech before I die." And the American says, "I would like to be executed before the Swede gives his speech." So it's rather amusing and I enjoy it. So those are the 2 surprises.
Okay, so anyone want to take the opportunity to ask the ambassador something?
I'm glad you all have a good sense of humor. You never know if you're going to offend people.
Yes, up here. So please wait for the microphone. And please introduce yourself.
Carl Xavier, CBC Investment Group.
Hi.
Thank you for coming here. It's very nice to see you and to have you in Sweden. But I have to ask the upcoming election. I can't help it. Could you comment? On
Yes, I can comment. I can say that I don't know who's going to win.
And next question.
Well, I can tell you for certain who is not going to win, for sure. You really want to know? Gary Johnson.
Yes, we have a question over there.
Okay, thank you very much for the speech. My name is Per Frankelius. I have a thought in my head. You talked about energy. Something went wrong. Energy at the entrepreneur and the venture representative, but you also talked about openness and internal openness because when you are traveling around, you see different things and you have to rethink things. I cannot get this together because if someone is have much energy about an idea, how can we know that this person is informed about all relevant information from the outside world? So are we have we much energy, but have we also the right information about competition and so forth? What do you think about the information intelligence level among ventures?
You mean when VCs look at someone that the energy is not enough?
Yeah.
Yes, well, that's absolutely. I mean, you have to balance the 2. That's why I was saying that I think that VCs look for that energy and that belief in your own idea, but that also you have a strategy. Remember I mentioned that. You have a strategy and a path and you have an idea saying, here's how I want to get from point A to point B. Yeah. So, and obviously look for whether they really understand what they're doing. But what I was really doing is emphasizing the part about the belief and the compelling way that a person comes across. I didn't mean to be flip about your answer about the election. Yesterday, I actually gave an interview at Expressen, which I think will be up today on their website, about the election, the entire interview. And I just want to say that it's really great that there is a lot of excitement and participation, particularly among young people and certain demographics that we've seen in the U.S. And there is a long-term trend from one election to the next, from 2008 to 12 to now. And the one thing that I see is that there is a increase towards a more diverse demographic. I mean, every month there are about 50,000 Hispanics in the United States that are eligible to vote. And the country is more and more diverse and inclusive and open, and the rest of it is, it's a democracy, vibrant democracy like the one in Sweden, and whoever wins, that's fair and square. Still didn't answer your question.
We'll take one question in the back there, so then I know we'll have to move on.
Yeah, thanks.
Hi, my name is Anders Ridefalk. I've been working at the Embassy of Sweden in Kenya before. And I know, are you aware about the Power Africa initiative by Obama and how that is going on, and the cooperation between Sweden and U.S. in that and the outcome of it.
Absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that. So for those of you who don't know, Power Africa was an initiative by President Obama to bring electricity to sub-Saharan Africa, about a population of about 650 million people, which will transform life, really, and probably the world, because that is such a explored and sort of area in terms of the potential that's there, human capital. So it'll transform the education, healthcare, being able to store vaccines because you have electricity, kids being able to do homework at night because they have electricity. And it's a project to catalyze infrastructure that will provide electricity. It's a public-private partnership. And Sweden is one of the biggest donors in that. So when I was talking about development assistance around the world, one of the areas is sustainable development, and that is one of the projects that we are very proud to have Sweden as a very strong partner. And thank you for mentioning that.
Well, I know you have a busy schedule that you are looking at the clock over there that we are actually past your
okay.
time
It's a
here.
pleasure.
And do you have time for one more question? Because
Sure.
one person down there that raised their hand. Yes, down there. Keep it higher so...
Good morning, Zita Raji.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for your speech. I really enjoyed it. My name is Anand Chinnapandian, and I'm a student from KTH. And I just finished my master's in nanotechnology, and I've been to many conferences, and there's no dialogue about nanotechnology and its current impact in Europe or America. And since you're here, I would like to take your feedback on what you think about nanotechnology and its impacts on business and how the opportunities are there for new students.
Thank you. I think that it's a very important and emerging area, and I think there's a lot of new creative technologies that are being developed around nanotechnology. And so I don't think that it's as invisible, perhaps my word, not yours, as you may think. I think that a lot of technologies that are being developed in Silicon Valley and in the U.S. and perhaps in Sweden, I don't know as much about it, are around nanotechnology. So to the extent that it involves life sciences, of course, Sweden is a leader in life sciences, and we're actually in the process of building some partnerships, government to government and business to government between the U.S. and Sweden that are around that. So that's a great world to be in. It's the world of the future in many ways, both in medicine, in science, in technology, and that's been going to be applied in a lot of places. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was an honor and a real pleasure to be with you, and good luck. It's going to be great. Thank you, Magnus.
Thank you. And when we're coming to the next speaker, it's very clearly that where she thinks the election is going to end up, and you will get that answer from Shelley Porges. But besides being a very strong proponent and working for Hillary Clinton even before she announced that she's going to run for president, Shelley Porges has a long career both in the corporate world, but more important in this context, being involved in starting 5 startups and being a very active angel investor. And besides that, she worked in the State Department under Hillary Clinton, working with their global entrepreneurship program. So she's been all over the world working with developing an entrepreneurship. So I'm really happy that we have Shelley here today, and please welcome up on the stage, Shelley.
Thank you. Well, let me step around Magnus here so we can get going. And good morning, everybody. I hope everybody had a great night's sleep, fun last night, whatever you were doing. It is so fantastic to be back in Stockholm. This is my 8th visit. And you know, when I was here on my 3rd visit, a friend who I was driving the car, we were driving back from Gävle, and she asked me, Shelley, you know, you come to Sweden often. She said, do you have a personal connection? And I said, no, not really. I just love the country, and I got to know it while I was working at the State Department for Hillary, and you know, just what's not to love? And of course, the weather's been fantastic, cooperating. The city's beautiful right now, and then I remembered I actually do have a personal connection, and believe me, I was kind of shocked that I'd forgotten about it. My mother, who was from Berlin, Germany, came to Lund to school 1936 to 1938, when the Germans, the Nazis, I should say, evicted some of the Jewish professors from the universities, and 2 of them went to Lund to start a Jewish high school. And my mother got a scholarship to that school and came to Lund. And that's actually where she learned her English, ironically, and a little bit of Swedish. But she didn't speak Swedish with me, so it's something I easily forgot. But of course, suddenly, as I recall that, it created such a special connection for me. Ultimately, my mother went back to Germany, and sadly, right after Kristallnacht, sadly, her father, passed away, but she was able to escape and land in pre-Israel Palestine, where she met my father, who had escaped the Nazis from Czechoslovakia by joining the Jewish Brigade of the British Army. And there they met, married, and started their family, which is where I was born. So like Ambassador Raji, I too am an immigrant to the United States. And as we're all considering the very important issues around us, which is not my topic today, but I just felt like I did want to share with you my special and very heartfelt connection to Sweden, and know that it holds a very special place in my heart. So, but today's topic is something very different. And that is, and by the way, thank you, Magnus, always for, Magnus was the first one to invite me to Sweden many years ago, and continues to invite me back, so I'm very grateful for that. We've developed a really wonderful friendship, as well as a good business partnership. And, but today I want to talk to you about something that I call a startup like no other. And that is entrepreneurship lessons I've been learning from the campaign. Because if you think about it, a presidential campaign is also a startup. Except that we know when our exit date is, and that's November 8th, which most startups don't know when they get started. Like you, I know many of you are actually entrepreneurs, some of you are investors, some of you have other dealings with entrepreneurs as incubator managers or whatever your connection may be. I've been involved in all of those things. As Magnus said, I founded or co-founded 6 businesses when I lived in the Bay Area, which I always say is, it's not really that impressive, in fact, because in the Bay Area, entrepreneurship is a disease, right? So even if you sell your venture, you just go on to the next venture because you can't get rid of the disease. So that's what you do. But really, it's fundamental, as the ambassador said, to have a tremendous confidence and to know that you're solving a significant problem. And really, I wanted to look today at our... Magnus, do I use this for? Because it's not showing my slide.
Well, no, I know.
Okay.
It doesn't show there, but this works.
Oh, okay. Very good. Okay. And this is going to advance me. Okay. Good. Okay.
It doesn't work with us today.
So
There's the first one.
okay. So on April 12th, when Hillary Clinton declared her candidacy for president, it was also the day that we launched our startup. And it was the world's most unusual startup. Prior to April 12th, of course, we had started hiring up some people, and our headquarters are now in Brooklyn. This shows you a scene on Roosevelt Island with Manhattan in the background. You can see the new Liberty Tower, what we call the Liberty Tower, where the World Trade Center used to be, World Trade Centers used to be. But at this time, we had, at this time that she made her declaration, we had probably about 50 employees. Today, we have about over 1,000. Some of them are in Brooklyn, many of them, several hundred are in Brooklyn, and the rest are spread throughout the country, staffing up offices to get out the vote, to mobilize volunteers, to register people to vote, and then finally to create the plans to get them to vote. So this is, in fact, in many ways, like every other startup. I'm not sure which, let me try this one. Is that working? Is it there? Okay, that one, good. Well, so like every other startup, as I said, so whether it's Spotify or any of these other ones you might recognize, Steve Jobs here, this is, the founder of Grameen Bank, of course, Professor Yunus, and so on and so forth, Jack Ma in China. You have Travis Kalanick from Uber. But like every other startup, the first thing we had to do is figure out what is the problem we're solving? Why is this candidate running? And the problem that we're solving is who can lead America and the world to the most prosperous and secure future, very simply. And every entrepreneur has to think about, what is the problem I'm solving? So in addition to what Ambassador Raji was talking about, that is having the confidence in your idea and your solution, you have to know that you have a solution. You have to know that there is something there that you have to offer that's very different than what your competitors have to offer. And like other startups, we have to develop a pitch. Are we talking about, is this kind of like a job interview? Are we talking about a candidate's experience? Well, in the case of Hillary Clinton, absolutely. She is the most qualified candidate we have ever had. President Obama referred to this during the Democratic Convention when he said she's the most qualified candidate we've ever had, more qualified than I was, he said. And then he looked down at Bill Clinton in the first row and said, and you too, Bill. And everybody laughed, of course. But it's true. When you think about her track record over 40 years, there's no one who's had the qualifications. And I like to say, and I've given this speech in Sweden actually before, I developed a talk called Some Leaders Are Born Women. And it's something that over time, many of us have had to get used to. Now, sadly, in the U.S., we're far behind the curve on this one. You guys are, reasonably, not only with the gender equity benefits that you offer, but you're clearly considered to be leading some of the curve. And yet, even in Sweden, women are not necessarily rising to the top. Women have a very high level of economic participation, the highest in the OECD, in fact, something like 77%, which would make you the highest in the world, probably, of traditional economic participation as opposed to the, offline. But still, leadership is an important thing. But here we're talking about, as a startup, what is the pitch we're delivering? Are we talking about the candidate's experience or their vision for the future, that sweeping view of what is the country we hope to live in? What is the country we want to have? And how does that differ from our competitor? Well, I think the question this gentleman asked earlier suggests that we all know that there's a very different vision being offered by Hillary Clinton's competitor and opponent in this race. The other thing that we're like other startups is, of course, deploying technology. There is no way today's campaigns could possibly function without the enabling technology that we're deploying in every aspect, from data analytics. We have a data analytics group of about 42 people, to obviously social media, just like everybody else. We want to reach all of our target audiences, to tracking everything, counting everything, reaching people, and so forth. And in fact, we are very lucky to have a CTO, a Chief Technology Officer, who came from Google. Her name is Steph Hannon. She's the first female to lead a technology group at a presidential campaign. She used to head up Google Maps. And one of my favorite things that she's developed, among the many aspects of technology that she's developed, is that when we go canvassing now, instead of a big pile of papers, they say, one house is here, go call on that one, then go call on this one, then go call on that one. Now we can pull out our iPads or our iPhones, and there's an app we can download that optimizes the route that they're assigning us. So all I have to do now is either walk or drive to the houses, and it's fantastic. And you would expect someone who used to head up Google Maps to know how to do that, right? Technology is very critical, as it is with all startups. And then, of course, I mentioned we're using data analytics for problem solving. And here's one of the critical questions we ask ourselves when we look at the data. Who is most inclined to our candidate, and which messages resonate best? And those are just two of many, many questions that we ask, and when we look at the data that we have in order to solve some of our problems, as you would with your businesses. The next aspect is, and this is perhaps in many ways the most critical one, and that is building a team. And I would build on Ambassador Raji's point about you having confidence in your ideas as you're presenting. There's nothing more important than building the most credible, experienced, and really enthusiastic team. Because it's not just about experience and knowledge. It's also about that investment, that commitment, that passion that people have for whatever it is that you're trying to solve, whatever problem you're trying to solve. In our case, I can tell you, since I worked on the 2008 campaign, that our team is unbelievable and a very different team. Not that we didn't have a good team in 2008, and we know what the outcome of that was, but the quality of experience, the collaborative collaborativeness, which, they used to talk about Hillary Clinton's team as having infighting and this and that. That doesn't exist. And if it exists, believe me, and I work with them every single day, I don't see it. It's an amazing, amazing team. So team is really critical. You cannot get anything done alone. You have to have a great team. Another one is need for funding. So like any entrepreneur who, whether you are funding your business through customer traction by having your customer revenues drive it, or whether you're going to VCs or angels or however else, or whether you're going to a bank for a loan or someone else for capital, or you have a grant from the government, however you're funding your business, no enterprise can move ahead without considering funding. And while it's not the purpose for our being, most entrepreneurs do not work to become billionaires. Most entrepreneurs work because they're passionate about their idea and the problem that they're solving. Still, it's essential that we have the funding, and the campaign is no different in that way. And last but not least is the creating customer traction. When we were starting the campaign, the question was, how do we quickly jump in to demonstrate that our candidate has the momentum? This was very critical in the early stages when we were competing in the primaries, and it's also critical now, of course, as we're moving ahead. And I'm perhaps answering this gentleman's question a little bit. You might have been referring to, I know everybody I've so far encountered in Sweden this time and anywhere else in the world, and I travel a lot, it's what is going to happen and what is going on in America today. And I can only, and the ambassador is prohibited from commenting politically, so you imagine you pick that up. I am not. I don't work for the government now, so I don't have to worry about that. The polls are very unreliable, and what we know, what we take to heart is that while we obviously watch the polls like everybody else, because we have to know what people are seeing and thinking, the polls are actually are unreliable in 2 or 3 ways. First, they're still predominantly based on research that's being done by landlines. How many of you have a landline at home? Is anybody here who uses anything but a cell phone? So few of us. I do actually have a landline in my home. I never answer it because all that comes on there is solicitations. But these polls are missing a vast amount of input, and our argument would be actually quite skewed. And if you remember, in the 2012 election, when President Obama was running against Mitt Romney, he was running behind about 3 or 4 points on the day of the election. They actually thought, being the general populace, we inside did not think this, but general populace thought that he might lose. He ended up winning by more than 5 points. And part of that is because the data that's coming in is not really representative data. That's one. Number 2 is that there are literally hundreds of polls, and depending on which one you're citing, they're using a different methodology. So you could take the very same set of data, apply the different methodology, and come out with very different outcomes. So in terms of predictability and predicting what's going on and how people are leaning in terms of projecting it onto the population. So I'll just leave that with you because this talk is not about that. But creating customer traction is important. And, we believe that by both tapping supporters of Hillary before, I was involved in an effort for 2 years prior to Hillary's running called Ready for Hillary. And that was very much about creating customer traction. A group of us, we were actually all volunteers, decided that in order to create some momentum for Hillary and encourage her to run, at the time when it wasn't clear she had decided to run, that we would mobilize, we hoped, millions of people around the country who were ready for her to run, to do so and to declare themselves, and by the way, to donate money to that event. In fact, so as an entirely volunteer effort with no candidate, actually, we raised over $15 million over 2 years. We mobilized over 4 million supporters, a database which we were able to turn over to the campaign the day the campaign began, and thereby help jumpstart the customer traction that she would have as she began the campaign. So that's very important, as it is with all startups. So now we've talked about how the campaign is similar to all startups. Let's talk about, though, how the campaign is really different and what we can learn from that. Hopefully this works. No, where do I'm pushing the same button you pushed. Maybe I'm not pointing at the right place. Oh, here, this button. So forget about that. Okay, sorry. So this campaign is unique as a startup in several ways. It's not necessarily unique as a campaign, but it's certainly unique as a startup in several ways. So the first thing is, when you think about your startup, one of your essential jobs is to define not only what problem you're solving, but to position your product or service or offering that makes the most sense to your target customer. In our case, our product, Hillary Clinton, if you want to call it that, was both known and unknown. She had been in the public eye, of course, for over 4 decades, and at some level, people clearly were familiar with her. In fact, for over a decade, she was considered, in some surveys that were done, the most admired woman in the world. Well, that is until the day that she declared for political office, of course, right? Because all of a sudden, people's, opinions and/or thoughts of you change. Then it became clear that most Americans really had no idea of her many accomplishments. They remembered that she was First Lady, of course. Some even remembered that she had been a senator from the state of New York, one of our big states, important state. But their understanding was covered by old notions of what they remembered about her, and some of that what was associated with Bill Clinton's most scandalous moments of his presidency. So not necessarily his great accomplishments, which is that, we prospered under the Clinton administration tremendously. When I used to make calls in the 2008 election and somebody would say, oh, I don't want to go back to the Clinton days, I used to want to say to them, I wasn't this brash, but I used to want to say to them, well, which part of prosperity and peace did you not like? Because it was a very prosperous and peaceful time for us, relatively speaking. So, but they remembered, they started thinking about the negative things that were associated sometimes with his term, and that came across to her sometimes. The second thing that made this campaign different, in some ways, than most entrepreneurs face, is that we had a really unusual and rapidly changing competitive realm and sphere. We began with having 21 competitors, 4 other Democrats and 17 Republicans. And when you're managing a campaign or when you're managing your enterprise, you have to look forward and say, who am I really competing with? And who's going to last here long enough? And who's going to be, in the end, the one that I'm going to have to position against? Because it's one thing to position against a Ted Cruz or, for that matter, a Bernie Sanders. And it's another thing to position against a Donald Trump. So you have to think about all of that. Who are the likely ones to emerge from this contest that I'm going to really have to position against? Now, ending with the one crazy R, as I put it here, the one crazy, whom some would say isn't even really a traditional conservative. He's not. He's not a traditional conservative Republican. Is something like fighting the craziest terrorists in the sense that it is asymmetrical warfare. You just actually never know what to expect. So inasmuch all the planning in the world isn't entirely going to prepare you for what you have to. So you not only have to be prepared, but you also have to be really nimble. You have to be able to pivot often, fast, smartly in order to, compete. Then the other thing that made us slightly different as a campaign versus other startups is that we have some unique legal and operating constraints. Not only are we required to disclose things like who has donated to the campaign and from where, a very good, which is a good thing if a demanding thing to maintain for transparency, but we're also expected to meet many other needs. For example, disclosing past tax returns, which our opponent has not done, something no startup has ever had to do as they are trying to build an audience. So just think about some of the things that, as a campaign you have to do. That's very different from, your typical startup, and yet things that must be done. And then, as I mentioned earlier, possibly the single most compelling thing about us as a startup that's very different from other startups, but teaches us some lessons, is that we know when our exit date is. So it's November 8th. And so when people call me and say, Shelley, would you come over and advise us about this or that, which I do in normal times, I say, well, no, sorry, I'm involved in a startup. We know when our exit date is, and it's 4 weeks away. I'll see you November 9th. And the reality is that not only do we know our exit date, but think about this. Another way we're different from other startups is that whether we succeed is binary. As Newsweek said, it's hers to lose, which means that it's not about if you fall short of revenues in November, no problem, scooch over to December, make it all up because it's the holidays or whatever. No, it doesn't work that way. On November 8th, we find out whether we win or lose. And that's it. And that's the end of it. Or that's the beginning of it, as however you may look at it. So anyway, those are some of the ways that we're different. Now, so let's just quickly talk about how do we position? Lessons that we've learned. Do we approach this as a job interview? All the experience she's had through the time that, not just when she was Secretary of State, and this is a photo that's an iconic and famous photo about the time that they were observing the attack on Osama bin Laden. But tremendous, amazing experience she had traveling almost 1 million miles over 4 years, and even if you have your own plane, trust me, it's a lot of travel. Or do we talk about really who she is, her talk about her from a job interview point of view, her talent, her temperament, her track record, or do we talk about it from a sales call pitch point of view, which is, kind of what's the personality, the profile, and the pitch? And what I'm suggesting here is there's substance and then there's emotion. And both of those, as we've learned, are things that we need for a campaign. And P.S., so do you as an entrepreneur as you're pitching. The first thing is to persuade people, to connect with people, and to persuade them that your candidate has their interests in mind. And with Hillary Clinton, of course, she's had over 40 years of a track record and of demonstrating that she has been nothing if not out there to better the lives of the average American, of women, children, and others, both in our country and all over the world. But secondly, also beyond the emotional pitch, to speak substantively about some of the actual accomplishments that she had, ranging from putting the issue of women's rights on the global stage at a time. Today we take it for granted, but when she spoke in Beijing in 1996, that wasn't the conversation at all. Babies were being murdered in China, frankly, and because they were girls, as well as many other challenges all around the world, and she always stood for that. She negotiated the first nuclear non-proliferation agreement, for example, when she was Secretary of State. People don't even think about that, know about that the United States had with Russia, the START agreement, that had been negotiated in over 20 years to try to take nukes off the planet. This speech isn't about all the things that Hillary's done, but I could go on for a long time. But what we learned about positioning, though, is that you need both the emotional part of the pitch and the substantive part of the pitch to be successful. And this election has also made it clear that the American public, though, wants to be wooed. It's not good enough to say, look at her resume, and she's got the resume. It's also important that they fall in love with her. And this is the challenging part, because Hillary Clinton's a very serious person. When you meet her in person, she's extremely warm and she's extremely engaging. But when she gets up on a stage, most of what you see from her is the brains. And what we always like to say, what people need to understand is that her heart is as big as her brain. And those of us who have had the privilege of working with her can attest to that. As someone once said, they may forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And that is really one of the keys to winning an election. And I think if you watch the first debate about a week and a half ago on Monday night, you would have seen that she made every effort to get beyond her typical, I'm the smartest one in the room, to, I'm the one who cares most about you. Another strategy is that everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. What do we mean by that? Well, like every entrepreneur, some of you, how many of you have heard of minimum viable product and Eric Ries and, well, you need to get out there as an entrepreneur and just do it and find out whether your product works or not, whether it's actually solving a problem, whether customers are really willing to pay for it, and so forth. So when you find the market conditions changing, though, you need to pivot. And I love this quote from Mike Tyson, because I think it encapsulates what we're talking about. We all go out there in the marketplace, and immediately, usually, we find something that's going on that has to change our path. And as entrepreneurs, we have to figure out how to change and how to change quickly. When Hillary began her campaign, she had the largest number of prospective competitors any presidential candidate had ever faced, as I mentioned. Who knew what would be the leading issues by the time of the general election or the leading candidate? We really didn't know then. In fact, no one imagined it would be the guy who ended up standing, the last man standing. So little did we imagine that enough Americans would vote in the primaries for Trump to have him be the one. How did that happen, you might ask? Maybe that was part of your question here earlier. Well, if you think about it, his 16 opponents basically split the traditional conservative vote, or at least about 12 of the 16 were traditional conservatives. And they split that vote, leaving about a third of it to him, which normally wouldn't have gotten you the Republican nomination, but because there were so many of them, that ended up being his way of consolidating the vote. Plus, he did bring in people who had never registered before and who actually were not Republicans before. They might have been independents or never registered. So that is, technically how he won. But of course, there's also his message, which is resonating with a portion of our population. Troubling to some of us, and something that we know we have to address. But for whatever good or bad reasons, there he is, he's the one. And now that we face him, we know that his weaknesses, as well as his strengths, we're looking at those, and we are trying to leverage both his weaknesses and his strengths as we run. Our key strategy is to maximize the vote among the groups that Trump has insulted, which is almost everybody, but not... So first and foremost, it's women. And women are important because women represent over 50% of our electorate, meaning women vote more than men. Partly because older voters vote more than younger voters, and there are more women among older voters than youngers, but also because in general, per capita, in every age range, women tend to vote more than men. And as a result, the fact that Donald Trump has been anathema to women in everything he said, we're really leveraging a lot. And you saw that in the last debate where at the very end, Hillary brought out this whole aspect of his candidacy. So women are the first group who represent over 50% of votes. Minority communities who are overwhelmingly for Hillary for all the reasons you can imagine. I probably don't have to go. I know, I find that many Swedes are following our elections almost more than some Americans are. So I believe you know what I'm talking about in terms of all the many ways that he has insulted so many different communities in our country. And in fact, frankly, in our estimation, and kind of inferred by Ambassador Raji's remarks, been un-American in doing so. America has been nothing if not a country built on immigrants. I mean, unless you were a Native American in our country, you are an immigrant, or your father or your grandfather, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, somewhere down in your line, they were immigrants because that's how our country was built. Also, young people who are being wooed by Hillary and Bernie Sanders on her behalf, who had a lot of success with young people. We're also using our superior fundraising to both advertise in the swing states. These are the states that are considered to be, I don't know if you know, but in the final general election, the way the American election works is very different than here in Sweden, where you have a parliamentary system. Ours goes state by state, and many of the big states we know are going to vote generally for Hillary. If we get a majority in those states, and we will, let's say in California, New York, et cetera, they will go to Hillary. And those votes will go to Hillary. It's a winner take all. But then there is a core 11 group, a group of 11 states where we don't know which way they'll swing. And so we're working very hard in those 11 states in particular. We're working hard in all the states, but in particular in those states, using our resources in particular strategically in those states to get those voters who are still persuadable and or undecided and moving them. And so that's both advertising and ground game. And finally, what can I say? Everyone loves a party, and Entrepreneurs for Hillary is something we launched. It's our invitation to the party for the groups of entrepreneurs and those who work with them to join the campaign. So we are a group of volunteers. We launched this thing called Entrepreneurs for Hillary because I realized as I was hearing from friends, how did you get involved? And da-da-da-da-da. I said, well, I just volunteered, but I realized it's not that easy for a lot of people. So 5 of us, 5 friends across the country, 2 of us are in DC, 1 is in Seattle, 1 in the Bay Area, 1 in New York. we launched something called Entrepreneurs for Hillary, entirely volunteer. We have a volunteer digital team that's built us a website, designed all of our collateral material, et cetera. We're totally aligned with the campaign. We proposed it to the campaign before we launched, so they would know we were doing it. Every penny we raise goes directly into the campaign through links that link to the campaign. And we have mobilized thousands of entrepreneurs around the country, including some famous ones. Last week, for example, you may have heard Steve Case, the founder of AOL, came out with an op-ed in the Washington Post saying 4 reasons why I'm voting for Hillary. And he's not a Democrat. We have Elon Musk's younger brother, Kimball Musk. Elon actually has donated. He didn't want to be public on our website, but we have lots of entrepreneurs all over the country, big entrepreneurs, small entrepreneurs, and everybody in between, as well as those who serve that community, involved in our community. And we've mobilized thousands, we've raised millions, and we're very proud of some of the things we've accomplished with the initiative. So here are some of the more famous entrepreneurs. You might recognize your friend Kimberly Cerrone there, but there are others here. One I want to point out, like, whereas Carly Roney, it's hard to see her here with this, but she's the last one down there. She's the founder of the Not.com. It's one of the few women-founded companies that IPO'd successfully, but we have many others. So, anyway, there's nothing. I'll just go to the last slide and just say the final way that we're different from the typical thing is what I've already said, and that is there's nothing like an exit date to concentrate your attention. And, it teaches us that if you, in your own enterprise, and it's a lesson I'll take when I move forward, either whether I'm investing in companies or, potentially starting another one, something we really need to think about, what is it about our company that we can mobilize all of our team around that will really help focus them in a very productive way? And I can assure you that you cannot imagine the things that fall away when you say, okay, here's our date. What are the most important things we can do now, and who can help us get it done? It is an extraordinary tool that most of us don't use. So I really encourage you to think about that. And even if you don't have a real exit date, create some artificial points of actions to force action, because it's extremely important that you use it as a way of sifting out the unimportant, not just the not urgent, and leverage the power of your team. So with that, Election Day does this for us, as I said. Since the convention in July, just as an example of how it's forced action, since the convention in July, when people started really realizing, oh my gosh, it's only 3 months, we have raised as much since end of July to today. We've raised over 60% more than we had in the prior 17 months. That's just one measure of that urgency. So, when during the convention, President Obama said to the group, he had mentioned Trump, and then everybody in the audience went, boo! And then he said, no, don't boo, vote. Well, after the Brexit vote, I tell everybody, don't boo-hoo, vote. Don't cry after the fact, act now. And so with that, I'm confident to answer your question. I know that Hillary will win, and I know she'll win for several reasons, because I know that, first of all, the polls don't tell the whole story, and we have people in the field that, have a sense of some other things going, particularly in those swing states that will mean everything. I'm confident she'll win because you can see the kinds of traction she's building, and the kind, finally in this last, number of months, the media is finally investigating Trump for all the reasons they need to. And I hope you'll join us in celebrating our first woman president when she does. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before we open up for a few questions, I just want to, from your other experience of being 5 or 6 startups and so forth, what is the most 2 important lessons you've learned from that to add to the picture painted with the campaign?
Well, I think, it's what I said. Number 1, are you solving a real problem? And are there customers out there willing to pay for it, period? Because as I always say to people, it's great if you have a great idea and your mother thinks it's great, your cousin thinks it's cool, whatever. But if there are not customers willing to pay for it, it's not a business. So it's so critical when young people, I'm an entrepreneur in residence at Georgetown University, among things, various other things I do when I'm not working on the campaign. And, young people always, that's what they ask you. They say, well, should I start a business? How do I know if it's a good business? Whatever. And those are really the two most important measures. And I say, look, if you have an idea, go talk to some prospective customers. Get a reaction. Find out how much they would be willing to pay. And sometimes get them to pay. Do a prototype. Get them to pay. Because if they're not actually paying, they could say, yeah, it's nice. I like it. But, you never know. So I would say those are the critical things. And just as I shared with you lessons from the campaign, I come to the campaign, of course, with my entrepreneurial hat on, thinking, what can we do for the campaign, which is why we launched Entrepreneurs for Hillary, what we can do for the campaign that would help the campaign do a better job. And that's kind of a give and take.
Okay, yes. Keep your hand up and start with the question.
Bill Borton with American Insights. I'm really glad that you mentioned the importance of vision for an entrepreneur. Please tell us, what is Hillary's vision if she wins?
Thanks for asking that. Hillary's vision is to create a future for all Americans. As you know, if you look at our economics, we have had a wider and wider divide, as many developed countries have had, between the haves and the have-nots, or as some people will call it, the 1% and the others. When we look at our economic growth of the last number of years, much of that has gone to the benefit of the 1%. And a lot of that is based on some of the policies that we have an opportunity to create. So her vision is to drive an innovative future. The other part of her vision that I particularly, and I imagine you would as entrepreneurs, would appeal to you, is that Hillary came out from day one with an agenda to support an innovative economic growth for the 21st century, meaning not only inclusive, but also using research, R&D, and science to drive innovation. And, America has historically been recognized as an innovation nation, and we want that to continue. And some of that, while it always does continue at some level, we want to accelerate and catalyze that, so that just when John Kennedy declared that we're going to put a man on the moon, and that created so much emphasis and resources that went behind innovation, she will do the same for a clean energy future, because it goes hand in hand with, of course, saving the planet.
Okay, we had a question down there, and then.
Hello, Shirley. This is Sandeep from KTH. And first of all, I should say that's a great comparison with the lessons learned from Hillary's campaign with that of an entrepreneur. One thing that I always believe is that every entrepreneur must have the sense of, or the ability to convince, and the factor of persuasion, especially when going to an investor or a VC. Mm-hmm. In the same way, I see how it should have been difficult for you reaching the contributors. Was there any specific instance where you had tough times in convincing them to contribute towards your campaign, and how did you overcome that?
Thanks for the question. That's a great question. Well, there are multiple answers. First of all, imagine that we have many target audiences for our fundraising. So, what the appeal we would use for a young audience versus a Latino audience versus, an audience very interested in trade or whatever would vary. But she's got positions on all of this, and you can all see it on hillaryclinton.com under /issues. But more specifically, as I said before, people want to feel like they're part of it. They want to be persuaded emotionally, and then they want to be persuaded substantively. Ironically, for a long, long time, the biggest challenge we had in fundraising was that people thought, oh, it's Hillary, she's got it in the bag, no problem, she doesn't need my support. Everyone assumed that because she was Hillary, that it was a foregone conclusion. We never assumed that. We always believed that it was going to be a hard fight. It was going to be an ugly fight. We didn't know who would win in the beginning, but even as we moved along, we saw, what the fight was going to look like, and knew it was going to be harder and harder. So we never assumed that we would win. And that was frankly the hardest. Once we got people over that and said, no, we actually need the resources. We cannot take this for granted. Because if we get this wrong, remember, it's a binary outcome. we either win or we lose. It's not like she can then do something like, So that was actually the hardest thing. But it was once we explained to people how the resources were going to be used, and again what her vision is, people were relative to their interests. People were persuaded, and we have had a historically successful financial campaign.
Well, thank you, Shelley.
Thank you.
I'm sort of the gatekeeper and keep the program going. Thank you very much.
And, okay, thanks. Thanks for the opportunity.
I know there are many more questions, but Shell will be here all day, so there's plenty of time in the breaks to talk with her and others. Now I want to ask to come up on the stage while I just fill the Sandra Albrecht, particularly working with the founder of the Ericsson Garage, and Lotta Ljungqvist from G Healthcare Sciences. And I can't get my computer to work these days. Amazing enough. Please sit over there while I'm trying to make the technology. Because one thing that come up over the years at the forum, and particularly a few years ago, there was discussion about sort of what big businesses do, and I need help with this, but to talk about so the interconnection, how big businesses can help entrepreneurs and small businesses to become more successful in going particularly global, but also as customers and so forth. And over the last year or so, we've seen a trend now, or development in Sweden, where a lot of the big companies are getting back into the space of entrepreneurship innovation with initiatives. We have 2 examples here, and we'll have a longer discussion, one of the parallel sessions this evening. But this is just to have a little bit of teaser with 2 of the people that are going to be part of that seminar after lunch. And my question to you guys, why are you doing this? Very short and brief, sort of, I want to ask you in this short session now, 2 questions. What's in it for you, and what's really in it for the entrepreneurs, and what are the benefits for the entrepreneurs and the innovators and SMEs that you bring to the table? Do you want to go first, Lotta?
Yeah, so what's in it for you as an entrepreneur? We are sort of GE Healthcare Life Sciences. We're starting up a bioprocess innovation hub together with Vinnova and the Swedish government as a part of their collaboration program, the Samverkansprogrammet. And what's in it for you as an entrepreneur? You get access to an industrial environment. You get access to how business is actually done. I very much would like to echo Shelley. We meet a lot of technology, a lot of good passion and a lot of energy around new innovation. But is there a need for it? What are the typical questions you need to ask and get answers for? Is there a need for it? And is someone willing to pay for it? A very, very tricky question. And I meet lots of cool technology. Everyone loves technology. But if you are able to convince someone to pay for it, you will win. And to get into an environment where those questions are asked and where you get sort of our initiative is a test bed for life science, you will be able to test and try your technology in that environment. So get to those convincing arguments about how you will win in that market space. So that's the entrepreneurial answer. So maybe you want to continue from your end.
Thank you, Lotta. Good morning, everybody. So for Ericsson, what is it for Ericsson? I will start that now with the entrepreneur then. For us is to learn really what are the pain points, to really understand that, what kind of new things you can bring to us. You have to understand that we are living in an age when applications and devices are really, really going to drive the network. So all those golden days are over when we went to the standardization bodies with our big customers, telcos, and then we said that this is a network, take it or leave it. This is what you get. Thank you very much. If you think about Facebook or Google, they are extremely strong when it comes to networking. They are starting to open source communities around even on base stations. So we really have to understand what are the new applications, what are the new services to drive our core business, which is about networking. So this is very important to be open and open to the new ones, to the really new ones which are driving the economy. So this is for us. And then again, echoing just like you said, Lotta, and then Shelley, and then even Ambassador Raj said, that it's really about for the entrepreneurs is giving a platform, an open innovation platform, to very quickly validate your technology, your markets, or your business. Ericsson is a global company, 180 countries. We can really help you to get out there, not just where you are geographically here in Sweden or in the Silicon Valley, as a matter of fact, but we can reach out to other markets and then to other businesses to really help validate if it's going to work or not.
Do you want to add something? Lotta?
Yeah, so what's in it for us as a large company? So GE is a very large company. And I can tell you, we're very innovation driven. We need and want more technology. And we also recognize that not all the innovation is done within GE. We need you as innovators to probe us, to keep us on our toes, to make sure we drive innovation. And we can then use that partnership with new entrepreneurs and innovation and commercialize that across the globe. So I think the partnership between new innovation and the large companies is a way to win, especially if you want to go global. It's really tough to do that as a small sort of startup company and doing that together. So that's something we're really interested in, and that will help us to drive our business together with you as an entrepreneur.
So what have been the biggest challenges for you to get the Eric Garage going and your life science hub going up in Uppsala? What's been the biggest challenges so far to get it sort of started?
So for our initiative, we're just starting up right now. We just announced this initiative in June, and we're actually building a new building that will support as a test bed for industrialization of life science, biology or technology. So we're just in a starting up mode, and I think there's so many excuses within a big company to say no to something that is this bold. So it's sort of, it's tricky, it's risky. I think that entrepreneurial piece needs to be within the company as well. So to gain traction and to open up, it's always easier to do what you used to do. But that's not the way to win. You need to open up to be able to win.
Sandor.
We have started 2.5 years ago, and honestly, the biggest challenge was scaling. How to scale, how not to scale fast, how not to scale too slow, where to find the passionate people who really would like to have Ericsson garages and join this network or community, what we are having. And of course, injecting another operating system, another way of thinking within a big corporation like Ericsson. You might think that it's a kind of a cultural change. So I think these two things were the biggest challenges. If I consider myself as an entrepreneur when I started up this Ericsson Garage initiative. So I think scaling is one of the key issues here.
Well, thank you. This was just a short introduction to a little bit that is a new topic that we're getting into, and I think it's going to be really exciting. And they are here all day, so if you want to do business with GE or Ericsson, here you have two key players to exchange your business card to and pitch your ideas to, and they will also be back in the afternoon in the parallel sessions. So thank you, Sanders. Thank you, Lotta.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before the break, and we're giving them the hard task, so to be there between you and the coffee break, which is sort of in Sweden a hard thing to do because people are craving their coffee. But we wanted to address one thing in particular, sort of entering the US market, be careful what to wish for, and I'm grateful that we have three very talented and experienced people talking about this. So please, you're going to be mic'd on, and I'm going to chat a little bit while you're getting mic'd on by our technician. So we're going to have Faz Bashi, Claire Fairfield, and Tanya Marvin Horowitz joining us. All three of them are investors, and I guess they do many different hats. And Tanya, for instance, both have operations here in the U.S. Faz is particularly on the West Coast. Claire, forgive me for saying that Claire lives in the flyover country, but that's the reason why he's never there. So he's flying all over the world, talking about investments and building entrepreneurial ecosystems and what you have. So please, well, we're waiting for Tanya to get mic'd. Who has a microphone? There is one. So what we're going to start doing is that Tanya recently gave I saw a presentation that I liked, and I'm going to put your slide up here. And there it goes. She's going to start briefly talking about some of the experiences she had identified and the differences and similarities between Sweden and the US, Sweden, Nordics, and the US. And then Fas and Claire will jump in. And I know, knowing these three, they will get going very intensely and talk a lot and things. And then when I say now it's time for the coffee break, we'll have the coffee break. So you have about 15 minutes now, because we're pushing the program a little bit, because I really want you to have this, so you have something more to talk about during the coffee break. And also wanted that you have seen on stage all of the US speakers, so you really know how to find them in both the coffee break and the lunch. So, okay, guys, come up on stage. And you can sit over there, Claire and Fast, to begin with.
Okay.
Yeah, start on with that, particularly the end. That's what we talked about.
Okay. I don't think this is on. Okay. It is on. So as Magnus said, I'm Tanya Marvin Horowitz, managing partner for a fund by the name of Capital A Partners. I've been here in Sweden now for about 3 years. And we have operations not only in the United States, East Coast, mostly New York, Charleston, which is in the South Carolinas and the Southeast. But then, of course, I'm here in the Nordics. And I do obviously live in Stockholm, but I as well travel throughout the Nordics. So not only to Helsinki, but obviously to Oslo, and then, of course, Copenhagen, and a lot of the smaller markets there within as well. Obviously, Magnus also said that I was in New York on Friday, and I was at a Clean Tech Scandinavia conference, actually. And this is one of the slides that I think is quite pertinent to what we're talking about today and in our panel. So basically what I did was I took this from my viewpoint. So my viewpoint being an American who's moved to Stockholm in Sweden, and looking at the region here and how I view the startups here for regards to investment. So as you can see here, we all know, well, not everybody maybe in the audience, but most of the people here do know that there is a lot of pre-seed available dollars to startups here in the form of these state-funded VCs. Almi is a great example of that, Vinova as well. There's also, of course, angels. And then, of course, there's the lack of what I call the early stage private dollars in VC. There is a seed and Series A gap here. It's starting to close. There are more funds coming into the region now. Then, of course, you have your Series A and B. Gentlemen, guys, that would be the North Zones and the Creandoms of the world, and I'm sure for everybody here probably knows who those guys are. There's also, I see a lot of enthusiasm. As the ambassador spoke about earlier, enthusiasm is a big thing that us VCs kind of look for. But I also see a lot of enthusiasm, and it's key for us as an investor to see where else can the market go. And what I mean by that is that technology to enter the US market or Asian markets or the rest of Europe. And that is key as an international investor because it's great to start a company here, but we really need to see a vision to other markets. Culture, contacts, and how to do business. This is really important as you enter the US market, and I'm sure we will get into that. Setup, big stuff. I would highly recommend you speak to a US-based attorney before you even set foot in the United States. There's lots of stuff that can happen there between, obviously Swedish taxes and US taxes, and you just want to make sure you're properly set up. And we can talk more about that, of course, as well. And then, I kind of, from my viewpoint, I kind of see the Nordics and Sweden in particular as a fantastic test bed. before going to a larger market, to prove out your technology, to prove out your customers. You've got a lot of fantastic potential customers here that are global. You have the IKEAs of the world. You have Kone, for instance, in Finland. You have SKF. You have Volvo. You have a lot of very large corporates that are right here in your home market that you can test your, whether it's a software platform or more of maybe a advanced material. So, we do see a lot of entrepreneurs try to enter the U.S. market too early. And I'm sure we will talk more about that. But from my perspective, these are some of the fallacies that I've seen, when they try to come over and they go to Silicon Valley or New York. They have no US-based proven customer, which then leads to the problem of the VC entrance, because a lot of venture capitalists are not in the United States, are not going to invest in a company that's based and domiciled here until you are able to start proving yourself with a US-based customer and then set up, as I got back to the legal and tax entities, to be able to do business properly in the United States. And then US-based employees, it's a lot of people say, I'm going to move over there. That's great. That's fantastic. But you really need to get that local competence. It's extremely important. So with that, I'd like to open it up to my esteemed colleagues here.
I insist. No, you sure?
Any comments?
So lots of comments. I mean, there are definitely lots of opportunities. I come from the Silicon Valley area, so I'm an angel investor. There's definitely lots of opportunities. It seems very exciting to want to come over there and try to raise money. And I think all of the points that you just raised there are just right on target. The key thing I would say is, as you're thinking about doing that, the core of your success will come from what you know before you come there. So if you can collaborate with one another, don't change yourself to become American. You're Swedish, and that's fantastic, and bring that with you. But collaborate with one another, learn from each other's experiences, figure out how your networks overlap with where you want to go. Shelley, so if you look at the slides that are up here, the ones that Shelley just shared with you, those bullet points, these are vast amounts of experiences that everyone has had that we've condensed down to 1 or 2 slides, key points. But if you take those words and understand what they really mean and take some actionable steps to actually make those things happen, you'll find out that this entire thing that we do, whether you're running a campaign or you're running a VC or you're running a startup company, it's all about relationships. It's all about friendship. It's all about who can you trust. It's all about that. So if you can figure out how to tie that back into what you do before you go to the next location, I think that will be a very helpful first step. And I can say more about it, but I wanted to give you a chance, Claire.
Oh, thank you, Foz.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you so much. Well, good morning, everyone. It's nice to see some old friends in the audience and some new ones as well. I think this is my 11th year coming here, and I hope I have at least another 11 in me after that. We have just a few minutes here, and what I would like to emphasize is one of the points that was made, and that is, really be prepared and do not go too early. One of the challenges in dealing with venture capitalists, if you need venture capital, and that's a whole nother topic, hopefully for later in the afternoon, you need to remember kind of how they behave. And the way they behave is they don't invest in that many companies in terms of the companies that they see. They may see 100 business plans and invest in 1 or 2 of those business plans. And you have to find a way to separate yourself in the crowd. And you also have to understand that while the VCs sit there and they have the money, and they oftentimes confuse having money with having both competence and the ability to make you successful, that's not the most important thing. And the best thing you can do as an entrepreneur is pay the price up front. And what I mean by that, when I was, I think a small boy, I don't know, I'm getting old enough now that the decades run together the way the years used to. There was a commercial in the United States, and it showed a customer talking to a mechanic, and the mechanic was recommending certain types of maintenance be done. And the customer said, well, do I really need to do this? And the mechanic smiled. He said, you can pay me now, or you can pay me later, but you're going to pay me, right? There is no free lunch. And what I urge you to do is suffer a bit more, as much as you can, on the front end of your businesses. Find the customers, establish a revenue stream, validate what you're doing, because that will fundamentally alter your negotiating position with your venture capitalists that you want to do business with. Because the dirty little secret of the VC industry is, or one of the many actually, but one of the dirty little secrets of the VC industry is that at the end of the day, even the most arrogant of venture capitalists can't really tell you which one or two of those 10 investments he or she just made are really going to be that super success. They just don't know. And at the end of the day, they're in the business to make investments. And while they will tell you no is usually the right answer, down deep, they have to find investments. And if you can come to the table with proven revenue, with a proven customer base, with something that shows that the market you identified is real and that people will pay you in that market, you have infinitely increased your negotiation position with the venture capitalists. And so the point I know Magnus wants us to get to coffee now. So the one point I would emphasize on this list is pay the price up front as much as you possibly can, because the pain that you endure today in terms of thinking you need the capital sooner than maybe you really do, or trying to push in the process along faster than maybe it should be, because we're all optimists and energetic as entrepreneurs, right? We want to get there. It's worth paying that price, because a few months, a couple of years on the front end may save you an infinite amount of equity, but also help you prove to yourself, as a couple of our speakers have alluded to, you have to really believe in what you're doing, right? And let me tell you, when you've got customers paying you for what you're doing, you fundamentally believe in what you're doing. So, are we okay on time? Or
okay, what do you want?
I'm perfect. I mean, because I think that's you absolutely have mirrored everything that I've obviously put up on the slide. But one other thing I also, you should really think about as an entrepreneur before you enter the U.S. or any other market is the U.S. is a massive sized geography. It is, 5 times, maybe 6 times the entire Nordic region put together. And so think about where you want to locate. If you have your operations or your R&D folks are back here in Sweden, think about the 6-hour time difference to the 9-hour time difference, which is on the West Coast. Now, I'm not promoting either one. I'm just saying think about it, because I've done business. We've all done business with the Nordics, and being on the West Coast is difficult. I mean, sometimes you're up until the wee hours doing, while we're awake here in the morning. 7 o'clock in the morning, I get an email from the West Coast, and they're 10, 11 o'clock, depending on where you are. So, think about that, and then also think about where your customers are located. It's really important. You can always get money from Silicon Valley. You can always get money from New York or wherever your dollars are coming from. But think about very strategically where your customers are located. If it's the Googles of the world, you might want to be on the West Coast. If it's the Coca-Colas or Unilevers of the world, you might want to be on the East Coast. So,
yeah. Can I see a show of hands? How many of you, it's a choice between money and feedback. Let me see a show of hands. How many of you believe that money is the most important driver for your business? Raise your hands. Great. How many of you believe feedback and guidance is the most important part of your business? Okay. Right. It's
qualified feedback, as Shelley put it.
Guidance. You want to know what your customers think of what you're doing. You want to know what the investors think of what you're doing. That feedback and guidance is something I sense. I see a lot of things in Silicon Valley. I have a lot of friends here now, thanks to Magnus, thanks to Vinnova and others. So I see many of you coming into Silicon Valley, and it really does break my heart when I see that really what you're craving is feedback and guidance. And that's really, I think, what is most important. You want to hear, you don't want to hear no. I know that. Nobody does. I don't like to be rejected. How many times have I said that?
Just focus.
Okay,
focus.
Sorry about that. But you don't want to hear no, but you want to hear no with a qualifier. right? No. However, if you do this, this, and this, and achieve this milestone, I believe that you will get closer to what you're looking for, which is a sound business model, a revenue model that can then continue to grow from there. When you do that in 6 to 9 months, come back. Does that leave hope open, right? Does that leave the opportunity for you to continue doing what you're doing, as the ambassador said earlier, as an entrepreneurial spirit, as someone who thrives on possibilities? I think that does. So I would urge you again, think about that. That is really kind of, the title of this is Be Careful What You Ask For, because in the U.S., we are truly a population of immigrants, as Shelley said. We're all there as entrepreneurs trying to create our new lives. And it's really part of our culture to hear that answer no and then to keep moving forward.
You want to add something?
Yeah, and we're okay on time?
Yeah, you can,
okay.
if you don't talk too long.
Well, that's hard for me.
I know.
Some of you who are here, who've been here before, will have heard me allude to this point or stress this point. But another thing in terms of the feedback is in helping each other, because it is all about the network. As some of you know, I grew up in the upper Midwest, absolutely surrounded by Swedes and Swedish culture. And so I understand the politeness, the kindness, the slight passive aggressiveness, those types of things. But part of the problem of being so nice is we don't always actually give candid feedback. And one of my partners, who I hope to get here someday, is actually probably the most important person in the history of Silicon Valley that no one has ever heard of, because he actually represented the money that put Kleiner Perkins, TA, Brentwood, KKR, you name it, into business, and did more direct investing in venture capital and private equity than any other investor in the 1970s and most of the 80s. And the reason I tell you that is this isn't advice coming from me. This is coming from the Rosetta Stone of Silicon Valley. And he was 25, by the way, when he started doing that. And what he talks about is the gift of candor. And what that means is, if you're in a meeting with Steve, that means when Steve looks at someone and says, I'm going to give you the gift of candor, you look for a seatbelt. But he does it in a polite way and in a nice way, but a very firm way, because he believes that simply telling somebody, oh, that's a nice idea, I find that interesting. How many, interesting is the word of death in the entrepreneurial world, right? Be candid with each other, because you're the greatest resource you have for each other. You're in a community where you understand, you're understanding, you're learning how this process works. You don't help each other by not pointing out what you believe to be flaws or weaknesses. That's the greatest help that you can give someone. And so in terms of getting ready to come into the U.S., you need that candor, because trust me, it is not a kinder, gentler world when it comes to sitting down with some of these financing sources. So as you get prepared, use each other and look to identify the flaws and the weaknesses. Don't just, say, oh, that's a great presentation, or I really like these 3 points. Well, that's fine. That's nice to like those 3 points. What are the 7 things you see that you don't particularly like or you don't understand? And if you can't explain them to each other, trust me, you're not going to be able to explain them clearly enough to your potential financing sources in the U.S. So give the gift of candor whenever possible.
Wear the seatbelt.
Wear the seatbelt, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. No, thank you very much.
Okay.
That was not asking you the same thing to me.
Of course you were.
Yeah.
That was not passive aggressive. That was a sincere thank you. A candor.
You found our comments interesting?
Yes. No, I thought very thoughtful and very good to know. Not interesting. Well, friends, it's time for the break. We're gonna go to break now and be back here in the different session. But please pay attention now, because now we're coming to logistics, and so we don't get like 150 different questions about this. There are going to be 3 parallel sessions now after the coffee break. The idea with those is that there will be a handful of people that will do some short introductory remarks to set the scene a bit, but really to be able for you to interact, to talk, to discuss, and really be a lively interactive session. So, and there, we decided to focus on 3 sort of areas: life science and digital health, clean tech, green tech, and then food tech, and to discuss the trends and opportunities in these areas. And this, pay attention. In this room, it will going to be the life science, digital health. In the next room, it's going to be clean tech, green tech. And in the room in the back, it's going to be food tech. So what's going to happen now, while we all go out and mingle, and I usually have a challenge. Faz and I always compete, he always wins. And the master is Shelley, I learned that last night, is that it's about making new contacts, business cards, new contacts. So don't talk with the people you already know because you know them and you can talk with them at another point. Take this opportunity now to get to know new people, and because that's how you continue building your network. So remember, life science here, clean tech next door, and further down, food tech. So now they're going to rearrange the room. So please take with you what you brought into the room, because otherwise you'll spend the next session looking for your things. So enjoy the coffee break, and we'll be back at 11:15 for the parallel sessions. Thank you.
All right, everyone, let's get started. I didn't realize it's already 20 after. This is the digital health and life science section. Is that right? Is everyone in the right place? Good. All right. Very good. So just a quick show of hands. You already know who we are. I just want to know where you're sitting right now. How many of you know each other where you're sitting? Are you sitting next to someone you know? You know each other already? You do? All right. Very good. Within the next minute, I want you to mix it up. Find somebody you don't know. Sit next to somebody you don't know. Okay? Find somebody you don't know. Sit next to them. Mix it up. I don't want you sitting next to somebody that you already know. And you've got a minute to just say hello to one another, exchange business cards, find out if they're on LinkedIn. All right, excellent. Excellent. That's what I like to see. That's what this is all about. All right, find a seat. Don't sit next to someone you already know. Exchange business cards. Excellent. I think we're in this session until about, 12:15 or so. So we've got plenty of time. Yeah, 12:15 is lunch. All right, why don't we get started, everyone? I'm Faz Bashi. I'm with Life Science Angels, a group in Silicon Valley. I can talk about that a little bit later. But I want to give our wonderful co-speakers here also a chance to say where they're from, because I want to shut off the slides in a moment, where they're from and what they do. So why don't we start with you, Anne?
Thank you, Faz. My name is Ann Lidgard. I am the head of Vinnova's office in Silicon Valley. I've been there now for 4 years, and one of the things that I'm quite proud of is taking the initiative to create what's now pretty well known as the Nordic Innovation House, which is in the heart of Palo Alto. It's a co-working space and an accelerator for Nordic startups. So I can tell you more about that, but that's all for now.
Great, wonderful. Lotta? You have to turn. Yeah.
I'm Lotta Ljungqvist. I'm head of R&D for the bioprocess business within GE Healthcare Life Sciences. So we develop tools and equipment and supplies for the biopharma industry and for basic research for proteins. So basically anything you need to be able to do a biopharmaceutical drug. And for example, if you happen to know anyone that has diabetes, they're heavily dependent of the tools that are manufactured up in our plant up in Uppsala. So I have my office in Uppsala, but I have a global team across 6 different sites, 2 in US, 3 in Europe, and 1 in India. And yeah.
Good. All right, wonderful. So with your permission, I'm going to shut off the slides. Make it a little bit easier on our audio-visual folks. So the reason why we're here is, I assume everyone's interested in life sciences and digital health. First and foremost, I want to ask another fundamental question. Raise your hands and be honest. How many of you have business cards? How many of you don't? Okay, the ones that don't, just go print 250 of them at some point in your life. Blank card, not blank, just white cards with your name and your email address, and just put entrepreneur on it and your phone number. You need to have something to exchange with other folks when you say, hi, how are you? This is who I am. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn, because this is what these events are all about. I know you love to hear what we have to say, but this event is really about you. We bring you together so that you all have something common to share with each other. So that's number one. The first one was find somebody that you don't know at these events and sit next to them until you get to know them. So let me just kick off the conversation here. Digital health, life sciences is a tough space to be in. Being an entrepreneur is equally tough. But we're seeing a lot of really new things happening in the space. In my world in Silicon Valley with the Angel Group, I'm seeing a lot more sophisticated entrepreneurs coming and talking to us about what they're doing. Maybe in a general sense also, maybe Anne, you could start off also and just talk a little bit about what you're experiencing in terms of some of the micro or the macro trends that you're seeing as you're dealing with folks coming into the Valley in the digital health and
Sure. Well, let me first start out with just saying, as we all know, I mean, this is a highly regulated market in many senses, which of course makes it a very difficult market to penetrate, especially in the US, but also elsewhere. In the US, you on top of the highly regulated issues, you also have this extreme fragmentation, between the providers, the payers, and the insurers, all of these different factors that come in and make the whole system extremely complex. So you have that on the one hand. On the other hand, you have trends of an increased consumerization of this whole field, just kind of tagging on to what's happening in other sectors as well, which opens up a more deregulated part of the market, which is wellness. So that's where a lot of the opportunity is, I would say, in the short, near-term part. But that should not deter you from really trying to address the very serious issues and challenges that we have in healthcare, but that do require you to have the endurance and to really tackle also the regulatory issues. So let me just start with that.
That's Lotte, do you have a thought on where things are going in terms of biopharma and serious life science issues?
So I think there's lots of new drugs being developed, either already put on the market or in clinical development. And when I look upon this, it's really good for us. We're all patients in the end. Hopefully not now, but we will be at some point of time. And there's lots of treatment for cancer being tried out in clinical trials right now, for example. But how will we as a society be able to afford that? To me, that is the trick question. So when I look upon our customers, what they're asking us is, how can we do more, cheaper, more robust, increase productivity, even increase 1% of yield is enormous because we can gain more. And how can we also get solutions in place so we can serve the entire globe? Right now, to be honest, it's sort of Europe and US that are decently treated. We have Asia picking up, but there's a sort of a huge need there still. And Africa is an entirely white spot, unfortunately. So I think one trend is definitely increase productivity and reduce cost to be able to sustain this as a business. And one way to do that is obviously to use all the data we have and to translate the data to insights and to make the data available for that development.
That's terrific. So I want to do something a little bit different with this audience. So I don't want to pick on any individuals, but I'd like to see, you just heard Anne talk about the highly regulated healthcare space and the fact that we're moving more towards digitalization. You just heard Lotte talk about how there are some very serious issues, but we're looking for ways of being more efficient, cost-effective in delivering treatments to a wider population of folks. Let me see if, one, does anybody have a specific question on any of those touch points? And then two, does anybody who is an entrepreneur in the audience have a quick pitch, just a quick pitch to say, I have a solution for this and this is why I think it's going to work. So first the question. And please stand up and introduce yourself and just speak loudly.
My name is Ruslan.
Oh, microphone. Hang on, I'll run to you. I'll be Phil Dunn.
Thank you very much. Hi, my name is Ruslan. I'm a doctor, medical doctor. I'm a scientist, and I do web apps. And I believe I have just a quick advice about what you're telling, how to make medical science cheaper and more effective. And there is amazing examples of that, like Foldit. Do you know this project from Washington University? Fold.it. You know, you make a game and give it to people, and people give make medical science. And the whole business of gamification and games for health, it is kind of such an area. It was just a quick...
No, that's terrific. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else have a quick thought or a quick question at all about what's going on with consumerization? How many of you are entrepreneurs? So you actually have a company and you're pursuing that pathway. How many of you are science, medicine, that type of profession? And who are the rest of you? Reporters? Students. Oh, very good. Okay, excellent. All right, so let's touch a little bit on the concept of what I believe is a real value proposition here in Sweden, which is I've been coming here for 3 years. You all were born here, and this is just natural to you. And I think the ambassador touched upon this as well. There is just so much Swedishness here with education, with access to healthcare. Obviously, there's a lot of issues as well. But how is it that how can we leverage what we just heard about the idea of creating more collaboration, perhaps on a platform of some sort, where we don't necessarily forget about intellectual property as barriers to entry, but create more of a community sense of approaching, you know about Foldit, right? How do you create more of a community sense of being able to collaborate on these problems in a wider sense? Because we can sit on the stage and talk to 100 people, but what if we could sit someplace else and talk to 100 million people? Do you have any thoughts on that, Lotta? Is there a way of solving problems that way?
I don't know that I have the answer, but I can give you some thoughts and ideas. I think we have a number of different issues to address, and if we use the new tools and the new ways to communicate, we have an ability to address them. So the Foldit is one example, and then I heard the other day that they've had sort of gamification challenge to a crystallography problem. You probably know how sort of proteins are folded and the structure of it. And it was actually a team of gamers that solved the problem. Yeah. So we should not restrict ourselves into the traditional skills. We need to sort of use the entire brains of the globe to solve and address these problems. And I think it's so much easier to collaborate across the globe now. Sort of time difference is an issue, especially if it's 9 hours. But it is doable with sort of video conferencing and good innovation like Skype, who happens to be Swedish. So all these collaboration tools are very, very useful.
So I'm seeing, from my side of it, living in San Francisco, going up and down to Palo Alto, seeing a lot of entrepreneurs. What I'm seeing in terms of a trend is a great deal more from angels and from entrepreneurs of collaboration. And I don't mean just giving each other answers, but I truly mean collaborating with one another, talking to each other about who the investors are, which ones are really looking more promising, where they can get good services, who do they trust. So the networking aspect of being an entrepreneur is definitely much different than you would expect. People are not cutthroat about it because they all know they need to survive together and that they need to find another pathway of getting to their milestones. Another thing also on the subject of collaboration within the laboratory at least is I'm seeing a lot of folks within our UCSF, University of California, San Francisco incubators, outsourcing a lot of their work. Their laboratories are essentially being done maybe at Karolinska or someplace else in Singapore. The data comes back to one central point where the investigator basically reviews the data and then tells the laboratory the instruction on what to do. Are you seeing any of that happening with your...
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it should also be taken one step further, and that's to have more open data platforms where the data is not just restricted to that research group that initiated the study, but where the data is actually made accessible to anyone who's interested in data mining and finding patterns in certain data. I mean, you can imagine the acceleration that we would have in research if that was more, a more common way of doing it.
I agree.
I guess one would have to, look at some of the drivers then for these individual researchers, because now, of course, the whole career is about publishing and being first, etc. And opening up like that may change those dynamics, but I think for the greater good, there's so much that could be done with that, and I really, really welcome these initiatives. For instance, through in the quantified self movement, and similar, where you have all of a sudden explosions, masses of data that can be used in really serious conditions, chronic health conditions, where it's really you as a patient, you are the expert on your condition, right? Much more than the doctor that may see you twice a year or so on. So I mean, all these new technologies and ways of processing now with more AI and stuff like that. I'm very optimistic, but we as a the regulatory, I'm pointing at myself, at Vinnova, but maybe government and others, I think we really have a big responsibility in opening up and making sure that this is possible in a greater way.
And I think as Swedes, we need to brag about things. And we have a fantastic open data source in life science area. We have the Protein Atlas, huge investment by the Wallenberg Foundation, which is an open source platform with sort of anything you'd like to know about the function of proteins in the human body. And why aren't there more companies that sprung out of that technology? I think there has to be more. That should come from that.
So to your point, I was on stage just last week at the big Health 2.0 conference in Santa Clara, and I talked about these fantastic resources that we have in Sweden, and that more researchers and others from entrepreneurs should want to come to Sweden and use us. Use our registries, use our biobanks, use all this stuff and collaborate with.
So while Anne was in Health 2.0, I was here in Stockholm for Digital Health Days, so and actually we switched places. It seems like that's so. So Nemo actually was my kind host for Digital Health Days. He was the producer of the whole event there. So Nima, you know the Swedish health systems here, the life science space. Maybe you could give a few comments from your own perspective about some of the things that you're seeing here.
Yes, I think one of the most interesting things, and I think this is really relevant in this forum, is that more and more companies here in Sweden are realizing that they need to go global from day one. When we look at traditional life science sector, ICT sector, they are regulated markets, but at the same time, you really need to think that with digital health days, you have this potential of, growing your company in a way that that typical IT company would be. Of course, you have the regulations problems, and so there's a huge interest from Swedish companies to start understanding how other markets work and how can you actually get entry to those, and especially when it comes to the consumer side, because we all know that if you're going for the public sector, there's nothing wrong with that. It's good to look at the public sector, but it's a totally different time frame, and it might be good also to looking at the consumer side. And we're not really used to that here in Sweden. We're not used to think about healthcare as a consumable. But when you look at markets like US and UK, I think this is becoming more and more of a reality.
That's terrific. Thank you, Nima. How many of you are quantified selfers? Do you describe yourself as a quantified self person? You do. Anne is. Mm-hmm. You are. So stand up for a second. Stand up say your name and what do you quantified self do? What do you do?
My name is Matthias. I have a Fitbit band, for example.
Very accurate, by the way, but that's okay.
You don't think so?
No.
Okay, maybe you're right. Well, it's relatively accurate to what I need it for, at least, so it works for me.
Very good.
So I guess.
So quantified self and other things. Do you have any thoughts on the subject matter that we're talking? So it sounds like you're on the consumer side of things, consumer health.
Yeah, for now, okay. But maybe one day I would be on the other side. I think it's very exciting. To me, it's about optimizing energy, basically. I think I'm not so much about the healthcare part. I'm more about the friskvård, as we say in Sweden, where you. It's about staying healthy. Wellness, yeah. Okay. So I think being interested in quantified self will make it possible to maybe optimize your energy and stay healthier for longer and so on.
Excellent. All right, great. Thank you. Let me ask you. Somebody else had a hand up here. So tell me, say your name and.
Malan, I'm working at the 3H Biomedical in Uppsala, and it's very close to GE. So I have a question to you about the cost-effective things. The most expensive things with biotech companies, you need to keep patents. So you have to fight the patents. It's really expensive. Like GE, maybe also lots of those patents. So that is really cost. So how are you going to do something like reduce the costs of a communication shared database? In the same time, you got to protect whatever you think is worth, to take company to the next phase, something like that. Mm-hmm. And also we have big problem with getting into the scientific publications, for they have to pay the money. So the scientific data, scientists are supported by taxing money, but their data is not available to everybody. So we have to pay once more just to get the data. It's very costly also. Mm-hmm. So I know there are companies or organizations like Bill Gates asking the people their finance to open source their publication. We cannot get the publication from scientists themselves because they said it's against the policy for the editor. They are not allowed to send the PDF. So again, where is the openness? So what do you think we could do as in Sweden? Maybe Vinnova can say every money we finish a project is to publish your data, for everybody to access to, because there is supposed not to be secret. Why should we have to pay once more for getting data?
That's great.
Yeah, very, very relevant and good point. And I think sort of open source sounds very good. And I think it's sort of a way to make sure that data is used across the globe. But also, if you want to be successful in your business and as an entrepreneur, you want to make sure you have really close control of your IP, your intellectual property. And if you don't have that, and if you need sort of funding, if you want to go to an angel or a VC, you're pretty dead from day one.
That's true.
Yeah. So you need to have a balance between the open source and your own intellectual property. And it's, even though it's sort of in the pharma industry, highly regulated, but also in the tools and equipment industry, it's a foundation for business. So it's the way it has to be. And actually, honestly, to apply for a patent, that is not very expensive. But to sustain it across the entire life of a patent, that is very expensive. But just to make sure you apply for a patent and get it granted, that is something you should be able to support.
So when I walked into the airport, I saw a giant billboard that said, "Welcome to Sweden, welcome to Stockholm. This is the state of the minds." And it listed all your universities, major universities. Somebody in this room probably has a solution for what you have just described in terms of openness and data sharing. It's controversial, but there is this new endeavor by a bunch of postdocs and graduate students to essentially liberate even the paywalls that are out there. You know what I'm talking about. So I don't want to promote it, but it is a reality. Our taxpayer dollars pay for these publications. They go into journals. The journals then create a paywall that you can't afford to pay $35 per article. But there are these endeavors now to essentially liberate the articles and the data. And do you have some thoughts on either the consumerism, the patents, the Vinnova comment?
Well, I actually wanted to comment a little bit on what Nima said about going global, and especially when it comes to the United States. I strongly encourage anyone who is in this field to consider the U.S. as a market, but they should also be warned, because it is probably one of the more difficult markets to get into when it comes to this type of things. You really have to make sure that you fully understand the dynamics in the U.S. market before you even start spending any money and trying. I do have a sort of a tip, though, and which could be a really interesting customer, and that's the veterans, the Department of Veterans Affairs and their whole medical system. I mean, that is a huge closed-loop system, which means that they're both insurers, payers, etc. And they now have a very, very forward-looking CIO, a woman that I met recently. if anywhere, I mean, that could be an interesting, if you could get your IT solution or whatever it is that you have to offer into that. I mean, they have like $150 billion budget. So that's, you know, just
And you were going to say
quick
something
tip.
about your quantified selfness. What do you quantify?
Oh, I have a connected scale. I have my Apple Watch. I used to have all these sorts of different Fitbits and stuff, and you know, I do it because I think I love data. I mean, I'm kind of geeky that way. I've always been geeky that way, and I like to see trends. And just, you know, and after a while, you know, sort of what the trends are, and then novelty wears off, but then there's something else that you can measure. And what I really long for is when it's more accessible to measure like real vital stuff, which is getting there. I mean, already now.
Yeah, that's very
So
true.
it's not just for me, but I really, I'm passionate about this because this whole field, because for two reasons. One is that we really need to do something about health and healthcare and wellness. Otherwise, we will not be able to afford it in the future. I mean, the galloping costs, and also, you know, we have generations of doctors and nurses that are about to retire. I mean, we just, especially in Sweden, we're a society where we feel we want equitable healthcare and quality healthcare. So something has to be done. It has to be disrupted in one way or another, and we can't just like wait. But I'm also passionate about it because of the democratization aspect of it. I mean, how can we really get this out to everywhere, you know, in the most distant parts of the world in a good way? And that's where I see telemedicine, you know, in sort of not just the old way, but really in the new generation as something extremely important. And let doctors do what doctors are good at, because a problem now is, I'm sorry, I'm just going on. A problem now is the tech fatigue. I mean, so we had, you know, the old healthcare, and then we start talking about, you know, health 2.0, and we start throwing a lot of technology sort of in the lap and you know, of doctors. And there's a serious degree of tech fatigue now. I mean, so if the doctors resist any change now in the hospitals, for instance, because they're already so bogged down, we're not going to be able to change things. I mean, that is a real obstacle now for real change. So we have to deal with that. And also, you know, another recommendation to you guys who are entrepreneurs there, if you do want to, you know, introduce a new tech solution or tech something that does something in the process, make sure it's really in the workflow that is there today. Otherwise, you know, you're going to suffer, you know, a lot.
How many
from
physicians in the audience again? Physicians? Do you agree with that statement? Yeah, workflow is important. Good. Okay. Oh, sure.
Sure.
Just make it a brief comment in our video.
I would say it's not technology fatigue, it's technology disappointment. I've been into this technology for like 2 decades, and I'm just disappointed because it was such a wonderful promise, you know, back in the days, but I don't see real, you know, help in real life. It's just gadgets and fun stuff, but it's nothing about healthcare.
Interesting. That's an interesting comment.
Isn't it really about technology that matters? It could be cool technology again, but if you don't fulfill a need, it's not useful.
Yeah, just to echo that, Patrick Sabotsky, Industrifonden. Previous to Industrifonden, I worked as a serial entrepreneur and also with IMS Health, tracking the M-Health explosion. And actually, to the audience who are startups here, I think more look for business-to-business opportunities. Try and help out healthcare, because that comes down to your point. How can we afford things? So my hypothesis is always we need to free up resources in healthcare to allow for more expensive treatments, for instance, or better services. So my vote is really go out and seek real solutions to the real problems in healthcare rather than making a 2003 M-Health application for consumers.
Excellent. You're going to be here all day? Yes. All right, so find Patrick and talk to him. So I just wanted to quickly talk about my quantified self. I do a lot of different things, but I've become a quantified reader. How many of you know what that is? So I'm tracking what I've been reading for the past year. And I'm actually very surprised about how much I read. I've read about 4,000 articles. 20% of which is art and architecture and pets and dogs and things like that. And the rest is startups, entrepreneurship, where the money is going, trying to follow the trail of life science, things that I'm interested in. Where's healthcare going? Healthcare policy. I'm an entrepreneur also. I have a startup company. I'm an investor. So I've been quantifying my reading. I don't know how many of you do that. I mean, the old days we used to keep a notebook, but now you can do a lot of things on the web. And I'm interlinking all the things that I read, and some of you may be part of the articles that I read. I will find you in the article, reference to you, and I'll try to find you on LinkedIn. So you should be doing more of those things. And by the way, when I meet an entrepreneur who tells me that they take their reading seriously and they know people in the field and they know of things that are going on in terms of trends, it actually creates a lot more credibility. So I'm seeing more and more of that in terms of serious entrepreneurs who are really dedicating themselves to that. So let's go back to the trends that we're seeing here in terms of getting companies off the ground. Life science, again, is a tough space to be in, but there are some very clever entrepreneurs who are figuring out how to leverage the resources around them. Lotte, do you have some suggestions or ideas or quintessential entrepreneurs in mind that kind of set an example for how to be scrappy in this economy?
Well, I think so. The life science encompasses lots of different things. So you could say it's highly regulated, it's the pharma by pharma market, and that's tough. Why not try a different space initially? Developing a tool or a reagent is significantly easier, less regulated, a shorter life cycle, so you can get there in a couple of years. That's a way to get started and to get sort of traction in your business. Maybe try sort of a different arena. Is it agriculture or veterinary, or sort of does this work? So it's risk mitigation, really.
There you go.
And sort of the pharma industry is a risky business. And if you want to go that journey, you probably want to find a partner at some point of time and to make sure you can address the global market. But otherwise, you can get further along the journey if you're going on the tools journey.
Excellent. Great. Any suggestions? What you're seeing?
Yeah, I just wanted to
quintessential
add to that. I mean, data is increasingly coming into play, and especially big data and being able to draw conclusions or see patterns. And there's some ways of I'm thinking of a company called Tommy Lab, who are collecting data now from millions of people with irritable bowel syndrome. So they're they don't need any FDA or anything, because they're not actually suggesting a cure or making a diagnosis, but they are, by having all these people voluntarily just trying to register, what did I eat, how do I feel, they're gathering enormous richness in data that then they later could make a pivot and actually make use of as a good tool. So that could be one path. We're seeing others. I'm thinking of a Danish company, Find Zebra, that's now specialized in looking at or finding patient patterns to detect the rare diseases. I don't know if you're familiar with this, the Find Zebra analogy. You hear the hoof. It's not maybe a horse. No, it could be something else.
Great.
So finding clever ways of getting the patients involved. You have patients like me in the U.S., which is now a huge, collection of people that communities that describe their, more or less rare diseases, and in that sense. So I'm fascinated by how now. Certainly, the advance of technology and rapid processing and the use of deep learning really can help us quickly to learn much more about certain conditions and certain, especially in the chronic disease realm, where it's more diffuse and really, Stone Age, if you think about how those are treated today.
What about from the audience? Do any of you have friends or contacts that are doing some creative approaches to getting their startups off the ground? Anybody have a quintessential example of that? Nobody? You don't have any friends out there who are doing creative approaches to startups? Okay, so I asked the question early. Oh, I'm sorry, one hand up there, okay. Stand up, say your name.
Hi, Jonathan from KTH. So my example would be Electrolux, and what they do is that they crowdsource innovations mostly from consumers. To my knowledge, they don't partner too much with researchers, which is a shame, especially if they're developing a refrigerator and whatnot, and the data could be open, for example.
Interesting, okay. Great. Any piggyback on that? GE?
Yeah, crowdsourcing and is obviously sort of a tool to bring in technology into large companies. And typically what you do is you put a challenge out there, and this is what we're looking for, and I can pose a challenge to you right here. Data is very useful, and data insights and any tools and algorithms for leveraging the data, but you also need to get the data in, okay? You need a sensor to get it in. And in my space, we want to look at protein quality already early on. And if you're also connecting sort of a sensor for protein quality into the space of single-use manufacturing, where we use lots of big plastic bags, if you can have a sensor that can look at protein quality in a plastic bag context, so single-use sensor that can also withstand gamma irradiation, because that's the way we treat plastics to make them sterile. Then you can come and talk to me.
There you go.
That's sort of,
see, that's
the challenge here, and it's obviously posted on other ways as well to get sort of a broader audience. But
thank you for sharing that. Anne.
I also want to say that the region of Skåne are now in the process of putting some serious money on the table in their efforts to digitize the healthcare down in that region, and they invite entrepreneurs to be part of a conversation where they will actually talk about the challenges that they have, so that you can really fully understand, what are the real problems that they are willing to put money on the table to have solved. I think we need more of those forums, where you really can like on a deeper level understand the
That's
real
wonderful.
challenges.
I don't know what region that is, but how many of you are aware of north, south, east, west?
Skåne, it's Malmö, Lund.
Oh, very good. Okay, I know that.
You know Marianne.
I knew that, of course.
Marianne Larsson.
Were you aware of this? Oh, please. Okay, very good. And say your name and...
Pirko Thompson, heading Uppsala University Innovation Office. I felt I have to tell something.
Please do.
Yeah. Well, we support researchers, and we have a Professor Maria Strömme in nanotechnology, and she and her group discovered this fantastic new material, which they named Uppsalate, which is high absorbing. They started a company, Disruptive Materials, and they ask companies and customers could come up with ideas, how can this material be used? So I find this is a way of probably a bit of a new approach. So I wanted to share this with you.
I like that. What took you so long? All right, very good. Excellent. Get over it. That's good. So if I understand the time correctly, I think we have another 15 minutes for this session. And I can continue with the topics that I'm going to pursue with our wonderful speakers here. But I want to make sure I, again, open it. I want to make this crowdsourced. So does anybody have a specific area of interest that you want us to kind of discuss in the last 15 minutes or so? Please. I'm getting my exercise.
Morning, I'm Adam Edström with Acreo Swedish ICT. This whole conversation is really inspiring, and it has the tendency of gravitating towards US in general and Silicon Valley in particular, as if the world was turning around Palo Alto. What I would love to hear is what kind of movements are there in the US that are reaching out, not pulling in this field?
Hey, I'm here.
Yeah. Oh, we appreciate that.
You want to take that, Anne? So I can say something very quickly.
Yeah,
Okay. Go
a quick comment. I mean, just as I can say as a reaction to the fact that we were given a few minutes on stage at the Health 2.0 conference just recently, I was actually approached by quite a few entrepreneurs that all of a sudden realized that the Nordics could be a really good test market, but not just a test market. We also have some really interesting test beds for them to try out and test their products. So there, I think we just need to raise the awareness more around the world of the assets that we have here in the Nordics, and not forget that we could also be a good stepping stone into the rest of the European market. But so in general, I mean, I don't have anything more specific than that. That's just anecdotal, but.
I have something specific to say, because I've been talking about this for the past 3 years. Claire and I have been brainstorming a lot of things as well. I mentioned it to Patrick earlier. A lot of folks, not even just from Sweden, they come from all over the world into Silicon Valley. And you're right, there is this idea of we are the center of the universe and this is what we do. And this is Silicon Valley. This is Silicon Valley because that's the way that Silicon Valley, and if you look at the history of Silicon Valley, you'll find out that's the way it kind of started. These geo forces of universities across the bay, this landmass known as San Francisco, where people were drawn to it for gold, this Western attitude of cowboys and gold rush, and all these things came together. But you know what? That's unique to Silicon Valley. But you have Stockholm. You have all of Sweden. You have this rich history, which I'm just starting to learn about. And it's just amazing. So instead of revolving around Silicon Valley, what we always try to say is, you guys are about 2 or 3 years behind in copying the things that we have done wrong. Just give it 2 or 3 years. You'll catch up to the things that we've done wrong because you're copying Silicon Valley. Don't be Swedish. Be Stockholm. Be whatever you want it to be. And as an added effort, I think the reason why Magnus brings some of us back periodically, the same people, is we're trying to build relationships, and hopefully you're starting to build friendship also, and eventually hopefully you'll trust us. But there is a way of reversing that whole process, but it takes effort from you not to be shy. It takes effort from you to want it, right? If you want the feedback, there are ways of bringing folks from Silicon Valley here. And people would love to be in Stockholm for a period of time and to train the trainers. You have angel groups here, and they do what they do, but they're used to doing what they do in their method. But there is another way. And the other way is more about tutelage and about feedback, about training and about teaching and about giving guidance and about opening doors and about connecting the dots, right? You should not wait once a year to just come to this entrepreneurial forum. You should have access to folks like us all the time around you. Meet me at a coffee shop. If I were living here for a year or 2 years, I'd be at a coffee shop all day long trying to do my work, but I would set up meetings to just meet, and that's what I do all day long in San Francisco. I have coffee shop meetings either with the company I'm part of or the other 15 companies in my portfolio or new entrepreneurs. But it's possible to do. And by the way, you have a wonderful group of a diaspora of Swedes and the Nordic areas that live in the Bay Area and other places in the United States. And all you have to do is ask. And I bet you there's a way of doing it. That's my thought. Lotta, what do you think?
I'm working for GE. GE is a very large company. It also happens to be a very US-based company. But also Jeff Immelt, our chairman, has realized that the US is not the only market. Our focus is primarily Asia. That's where things are happening now. You have sort of China, 1.4 billion inhabitants, and India, 1.2 billion. It's sort of a huge part of a growing need for infrastructure, both in terms of energy and airplanes and windmills and so on, but also healthcare, where I spend my life. And that's sort of, we put a new built facility for biopharmaceuticals. We inaugurated that in China just a couple of months ago. It's sort of, that's where things are happening. And even US companies are recognizing that.
But I think the most important thing in this field that we can learn from Silicon Valley now has more to do with culture than actually, the technology or anything like that. I mean, in Sweden and in Nordics, we are years ahead of the US when it comes to thinking about user interaction, user interface, design. I mean, the products that we see now, for instance, again, referring to Health 2.0, they look like IT stuff like 20 years ago in the way, you know, the data is presented. It's like ancient. This is where we have a real edge in the Nordics, thinking about human interaction and all that stuff. But what we can learn is the self-confidence and the boldness to think big. But I think that's probably the most important thing in this field that we can learn right now from Silicon Valley.
Great. That's awesome. Ola? Thanks. Yeah, Ola Björkman here. I want to follow up on what Anne said before about that we need to raise the awareness. Maybe it would be true to say that life science in Sweden is one of the best kept secrets in the world, and that's not the way it should be, of course. I have some experience when I was running the Stockholm-Uppsala Life Science a few years ago. We had, over a couple of years' time, we had 12 international journalists from Fierce Biotech, from GenomeWeb, from Clinica, from BioWorld, the really leading journalists in the world in this field. And every one of them came to Sweden and said, I had no idea that there was so much here to see. So I would say that I would like to see Sweden to be more present on the international arena, including bio. You see all the other European countries there, but Sweden is absent. So how can we fix that? Because there is a gap here, a knowledge gap in the world.
We're a small country, but we shouldn't think small. If you compare to Ireland, which is also a small country, they think big. And if you compare what they've been able to achieve in life science and the pharma industry, they have been able to attract lots of pharma industry. And that's also where we as GE just announced we're investing 150 million euros in building a infrastructure for biopharmaceutical plants. So if you're thinking big, you're able to attract sort of big initiatives.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just want to give a compliment here to one of our, let's say, sister agencies, organization, Business Sweden. They actually published earlier this year, I think a really excellent publication, which really brings out the strengths of Sweden in this field. So the publication is there, now it's a matter of marketing it and making sure that people also read it.
That's true.
So
I'll read it.
Oh, that's the one. Yeah, this is the one I'm thinking of. Would you agree that it's a good one?
Yeah, I saw it. You gave it to me also.
Yeah.
So let me just tie this all together in some common issues for entrepreneurs. No matter what language you speak or what culture you're from, risk is risk. Risk is risk. The biggest thing that we all do on this stage, whether you're a corporation or you're representing a government agency or you're an entrepreneur or you're an investor, is we try to de-risk opportunities. So if you can speak the language of de-risking and figure out how you can bring customers in that can generate revenue for you, or if you figured out how to brand yourself in such a way that people want your product and you have millions of people looking at your product online, we all want to see that happen. So, or if intellectual property becomes a matter of interest, that's what you really need to focus on. Typically, a good idea with de-risking efforts in place and some capital, but not a huge amount of capital, is attractive to any investor. So if you look at the fundamentals, instead of chasing after what you think are the superstars of venture capital, chase after your own idea and build on the fundamentals of your business. That's the part that you need to de-risk. I want to give you guys another minute or so to kind of reflect on that. What do you think? What are the fundamentals that we...
Absolutely. I mean, I get a lot of startups that come to Silicon Valley or to contact me before coming, and they say, oh, can you connect me to some of the VCs? I'd like to, we'd like to raise money. I say, I could do that, but don't think that you're going to leave with a term sheet. But what I can do is I can put you in front of people that can give you really good feedback about your business. If you grow your business in a good way, the rest will follow. So that's what I usually say.
Life science, same thing?
I think it's sort of, what do you need to do to win?
Yeah.
And to win is also to be very clever about your competition and recognize when you lack skills. I think that's a key de-risking activity. I lack skills in this area, I need a partner here. And that's the way to win.
Yeah, go ahead, Ann.
But I also, I mean, I can say that later, but I wanted also to recommend, this is sort of maybe an advertisement here. If you're an entrepreneur and you're in the connected health space, I would strongly recommend you to look up on the web Nordic Connected Health Star Track. This is a community of now more than 50 startups in the field that have community meetings. I think now it's every other month, starting in Lund.
Can I join it?
But yeah, absolutely, and they've had meetings in different places. The whole idea is because we're so sparsely populated, we don't really interact with one another the way we do in Silicon Valley. So this is a way of creating that interaction with interesting speakers on all sorts of issues, and it's run out of Lund right now.
Say that one more time. So what's the URL?
Nordic Connected Health Start Track.
Start Track.
Star Track.
Like it. Okay.
Okay, so it's a bit long, but it has a story of its own.
That's all good. I want to give you just a quick example of the risking and the de-risking aspect of it. A friend of mine who is a venture capitalist in Boston area told me the story of a young gentleman who walked into her office and basically said, this is how he started his pitch. He says, I want to give you 5 good reasons why I don't think you should invest in my company. That's the way he started his pitch. So he's being very realistic about the opportunity and saying, this is the reason why I don't think you should invest in me and this company. And by the way, if those things are of interest to you, because I know what the risks are, here are 5 reasons why I think we could win together. So he essentially demonstrated his self-awareness to the investor. It's not that they write checks. Nobody writes checks right away. It just creates an opportunity for a conversation. So I'll probably end with that unless somebody has one final comment from the audience. Anybody have a final comment? I hope this was interesting to you and useful. Get to know one another, connect with one another. I do have to make a public service announcement for a moment, so hang on one second because Magnus will kill me if I don't do this. So you're in room 18, okay? We're going to have lunch in just 2 minutes or so. This is room 18. The plenary session will be held in here. So that if you look at your agenda, session 2 will be held in here, which is why are big companies interested in startups and SMEs. This is room 18. And then session 1 will be in room 17, and you already know the sequence of rooms. They're one after the other. And then session 3 will be in room 16. So with that, I'm going to close off. Thank you so much, Anne. Thank you, Lotta. This is a wonderful session. Thank you all for participating, and we'll adjourn now. Thank you.
Thank you, Klas.